Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's program, History at High Noon Whirligigs. My name is Stacy, and I handle adult education here at the North Carolina Museum of History. And we're so glad that you're joining us for today's lunchtime lecture program. If you enjoy today's program, we invite you to head over to the museum's website at www.ncmuseumofhistory.org, where you can learn more about our upcoming programs, exhibits, and digital resources. This is also where you can find more information about shopping in our wonderful museum shop, as well as joining our North Carolina Museum of History Associates. Our associates and foundation provide crucial funding and support to the museum, which, in addition to many other things, helps make programs like today's program possible. We would also like to thank those of you who graciously donated funds towards today's programming. We do our best to keep our programs free to attend, but there are costs associated with keeping our series going, and we just continue to be so humbled and gracious of your generous support of the museum. A few quick housekeeping tips for today. We ask that you please keep your mics muted throughout the entirety of the program, and to please type any questions that you have for our guest speaker into the chat function located at the bottom center of your screen. At the end of the lecture, our adult programs intern, Alexandra, will ask our speaker as many of your questions as time allows. All right, so now it is my honor to introduce today's speaker, Jeff Bell, Executive Director for the Wallace Simpson Whirligig Park and Museum. Before becoming executive director at the Whirligig Park and Museum in 2017, Bell worked at the National Museum of Art at Duke University, CAM Raleigh, and the 21C Museum Hotel in Durham. He graduated from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro in 2008 with a Master of Fine Art. Thanks for being with us, Jeff. Welcome.
Hey, Stacy, thanks for having me, and thank you to Kara and all the staff at the North Carolina Museum of History for inviting me to speak today. I'm always excited to talk about Wallace Simpson and his work, and I'm excited that we have so many joining us today to learn more about him. I'm going to start to share my screen, and so I'm not terribly skilled with this, but I'm going to give it a shot. All right, so I'm, as Stacy said, I'm the executive director of the Wallace Simpson Whirligig Park and Museum. So we own and maintain large and small works by Wallace Simpson in Wilson, North Carolina. The park itself is open from 5 a.m. to 12 a.m. every day. And we have a new museum, which I'll talk more about towards the end, just across the street from the park, which is open 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Tuesdays through Saturday. So if you're like me and you went to see Wallace's work back in the day, this was in the 80s, this is what his work looked like. My mother was a high school science teacher. She taught physics and was very interested in kinetics and interested in weather. And she had heard about Wallace's work. I grew up in Goldsboro, and Wallace lived and worked in Lucama, North Carolina, which is about 11 miles outside of Wilson, kind of towards Goldsboro. And so my mother heard about these, and we went out to look at them, and I was instantly amazed by them. Later, as I got older and learned how to drive, many of my friends and I would go out and look at these in the day and at nighttime, and I was lucky enough to meet Wallace on one of those occasions alongside a couple of his dogs. He always had dogs around him. Those works became very popular, and many people came to see them. Over time, they began to kind of fall into disrepair, and so that's when the Whirligig Park project began to purchase, conserve, and install these whirligigs in downtown Wilson. So I'm going to show you a little video, which might be a good way to see the works. It's very difficult to describe the size and scale of these, even in video or photos, but I think this video may give us a good
Welcome to the Vala Simpson Whirligig Park. The Vala Simpson Whirligig Park is located on 2 acres in historic downtown Wilson, North Carolina. It is home to 30 large whirligigs created by celebrated folk artist Vala Simpson. What is a whirligig? Vala's works are all different from one another. They vary in size, materials, design, color, and the way they move. Though Simpson referred to his sculptures as windmills, others began calling them whirligigs, and the name stuck. He made many which are small enough to fit in your hand, while others are as heavy as 13,500 pounds. The American Visionary Art Museum commissioned him to create a large whirligig for their location at the Inner Harbor in Baltimore, Maryland. For the 1996 Olympics, he was commissioned to create 4 different sculptures, which are now permanently located in a city park in Atlanta, Georgia. As Simpson got older, it became more difficult for him to maintain the massive whirligigs in his field. They had become the largest tourist attraction in Wilson County and were beloved by many in the Wilson area and beyond. At the same time, Wilson Downtown Development was working to identify what would best serve as an authentic attraction that could be a catalyst for the revitalization of historic downtown Wilson. In 2010, a group of Wilson residents came together to try to make sure many future generations would be able to experience these incredible treasures. A non-profit organization was formed to oversee the project. The group purchased the primary whirligigs in the field from the Simpson family, and over a 7-year period, the massive sculptures were conserved in an old warehouse adjacent to the park site. After years of hard work and using the highest quality materials, the whirligigs were fully restored, and the new park opened in 2017. About the artist. Simpson lived in Lucama, North Carolina, about 11 miles from the current park location, and he returned there after serving in the South Pacific in the Army Air Corps in World War II. He created perhaps his first wind-powered machine while stationed in Saipan. While there, he constructed a windmill out of parts from a junked B-29 Superfortress bomber and used it to power a washing machine for his company. The son of a farming family, Simpson was not attracted to tending the crops, but instead to servicing the equipment used for farming, such as threshers, balers, and tractors. Upon his return home, he turned his affinity for equipment building into a profession, where he supplemented the family farm by operating a machine shop, as well as a wrecker and a moving service for heavy objects like houses, barns, and large-scale industrial machines. Around retirement age, he began to use leftover pieces and parts from his businesses to create massive kinetic sculptures that he placed in a field near his house. It wasn't long before people began to notice these engineering marvels that soared as high as 60 feet tall and twirled in the wind, and thrilled visitors when their headlights caught the thousands of sparkling reflectors while mounting the curve at nighttime. He also created a window display for Bergdorf Goodman in New York, and in 2016 his sculptures were named the official folk art of North Carolina. This whirligig is called Blue Wind. It is a good example of the basic way a whirligig works. It is free to turn in any direction on its pole. On one end is a fan, and on the other is a vane, which is a thin, flat, vertical section. The vane helps direct the whirligig into the wind, allowing the fan blade to turn its best. In many of the whirligigs, the fan is attached to other elements. In this one, called Dive Bomber Duck, the fan is connected to a colorful tube that turns as the fan turns. One of the most popular whirligigs is called Saw Dog. The fan blade is connected to a chain in a series of rods and gearboxes, and then to 2 men with a saw and also a dog. When the wind turns the fan blade, it activates the figures. The men saw the log and the dog wags its tail. Notice the large blue vane with triangle shapes. Just like Blue Wind, the vane helps steer Saw Dog into the wind so the fan blade can turn its best. This whirligig called Windmill is a good example of how fans work. The angle of the blades determines the direction the fan turns. Notice how the fans on the whirligig turn in both directions. This is because some blades are angled in one way and some are angled the other. Valas used these variations to make the whirligigs even more interesting to look at. The heaviest and most complicated whirligig in the park is called Mule Train. It works similarly to Saw Dog, but has many more moving parts. Whereas Saw Dog has 3 moving elements, Mule Train has 15. When the large 24-foot fan blade turns, it moves the 8 legs of the mule's ears, the 4 wheels on the cart, and the farmer waves his hand. The large area with the mules in the cart acts like the vane. It helps direct the fan blade into the wind. This 13,500-pound sculpture seems to move effortlessly as the direction of the wind changes. Visiting the Vala Simpson Whirligig Park at nighttime offers an incredible experience. Find one of 4 push-button locations in the park and press the red button. The traditional park lights will go down, and special vector lights will come on for about 20 minutes. Make your way to the closest light pole marked with a red star. Stand on the red star and look towards the park. You'll see thousands of reflectors shining in the night. Try out the views from 8 different red star locations and pick out your favorite. Vala's used perhaps as many as 22,000 different pieces of cut road signs on the whirligigs in the park. When they were originally located on his land, visitors would often park and turn on their car headlights to see all of the colorful pieces turning in the dark. The Whirligig Park hosts many concerts, performances, films, private events, farmers markets, weddings, and festival on its stage and green and under its pavilion. This 2-acre park is the only spot anywhere where someone can view 30 of Valas's whirligigs in one place. It is a catalyst for cultural economic development in eastern North Carolina and a major destination for travelers from around the globe. The park offers a unique and memorable gathering place, serving as a community living room in downtown Wilson. Any and all events and activities in the park are based around the idea of having fun and learning. Kinetic Connections is the educational side of the Vala Simpson Whirligig Park. Through Kinetic Connections, teachers and students can make meaningful links between the art of Vala Simpson and North Carolina education goals and standards. Whether it's experiencing a Kinetic Connections Teacher Institute or bringing your class on a field trip to the park, our partners at A+ School of North Carolina and the Keenan Fellows Program for Teacher Leadership work hard to bring the art and science of the park together in a relevant format. The funding for the educational programming is provided by Wingate Charitable Foundation, GlaxoSmithKline's Ribbon of Hope, and the North Carolina Arts Council. Educators and students continue to learn about the amazing work of Vala Simpson in creative and engaging ways. We invite you to come and visit to see the whirligigs, enjoy an event, or schedule a tour or field trip.
So I hope you enjoyed enjoyed that video. I think it captures a lot of different aspects of our organization and what we do and the whirligigs themselves, the basic nature of them and how they work. I think I'm sort of endlessly fascinated by them, even though, as I said, I've looked at them for over 30 years. So I've never stopped enjoying spending time with them and always see new things in them. I thought it might be neat to walk through a conservation project. So as the video said, we have done a lot of conservation work on the whirligigs in our collection. And we've also done a number of them for other institutions and individuals who own work from Vala. So that could be even something as small as a couple of feet tall. He made many that were very small, up to very large ones for other institutions, like the North Carolina Museum of Art. This project was one we did for the Cameron Museum of Art, which is in Wilmington. And if you've seen the one in Raleigh, I think you'll recognize this one. Valas actually had a large industrial loom, which he cut in half and made two different whirligigs. And so one became the whirligig in Wilmington, and the one in Raleigh at the North Carolina Museum of Art. So this may give you a sense of the one in Raleigh as well. So as the video said, they are very intricate works of art. There are a lot of moving parts, and they take constant work. They are North Carolina's official folk art, which is a pretty cool thing. Valas was alive to see that award given. As I said, they're made of thousands of parts, and many of them are moving. So they could be made of bearings or bicycle wheels or truck hubs or fan blades, a lot of things that are constantly in motion. And our conservation team works really hard. So typically 3 or 4 times a year, we do major ongoing maintenance in the park. So that could be touching up paint or greasing the different elements to make sure they move smoothly, or replacing broken parts. So that's an ongoing project. So here's the whirligig from Wilmington. As I said, this is it was in quite a state of disrepair, and when it arrived, and it was quite a project to get it back to its original standards. This is how it came on a flatbed truck. It takes a number of cranes to lift them, put them on a truck and move them. I'm always amazed. Some of the whirligigs in the park, when we do maintenance, it requires 2 large cranes and 8 people to do some of this work, whereas Valas did it all by himself with reclaimed Army surplus vehicles that he turned into wreckers and cranes. So pretty incredible skills that he had. So here you see a large crane picking it up off the truck. The next thing we do is we load it onto carts so that we can move it around in our conservation warehouse fairly easily. This shows some of the wear and tear up close. You can see lots of rust, lots of paint missing, also some missing elements. Here's up close one of the bicycle rim parts. You can see a lot of the flaking paint and the rust and wear. This is Sam from our conservation team. He is incredibly mechanically minded and an amazing welder. Many of these that we've done, he has to sort of reverse engineer, figure out how Valas created the mechanics and how we can redo them so that they work beautifully. So we look at these in really close-up detail. We take lots of pictures, write down lots of information, and figure out a real game plan moving forward. This is the top section of that whirligig, and you'll kind of see it as we go forward. I like to kind of detail it so that we can see it throughout the process. Around the edge there, you can see those silver elements. Those are the sort of cups with holes in them that you put silverware in when you run them through a dishwasher, an industrial dishwasher. So Valas used things from everywhere he could find. Again, here's part of that. You can see that they're starting to take it apart and break it down into the individual elements. And when they do that, they mark all of the different parts and pieces, including the reflectors or cut road signs. You can see the small green and white and red and white squares and rectangles there. Those are parts of cut road signs. So we make detailed notes about the locations of them and the types and the shapes of them. Here you can see a frog element similarly that has the notes about the location and the size of them. So the first step is after disassembly is to remove all of the old paint. Wallace very frequently just used whatever paint he had around. That could be a can of latex paint. It could be a spray can of from Walmart or Rust-Oleum. And so he would use whatever he had on hand. We've really tried to work hard to use very high-end paints and equipment to make these last a long time. I tell many people that when you start to do a conservation project on a bronze sculpture, there's a lot of material out there. You can really go out and find how those projects are done. But for something like the whirligigs, there really was no playbook. We had to bring in national conservators from the Parks Department and other well-known individuals that work in art environments to really help us build a game plan for how to tackle these whirligigs. So as I said, we remove all of the old paint. Here again is the top section. You can see a lot of the elements are removed and all of the paint is removed down to the fresh metal. This is Mel, another one of our conservation team members. He worked, he's retired now. He still, of course, helps us, but he retired from his occupation, which was he worked in a dealership selling bearings and gearboxes. And so he's really knowledgeable about the mechanics of things and how they work. And so here he is getting something ready to weld. So often we re-weld a lot of the elements to make sure they're really strong, particularly if rust has started to wear them down. Here again is that top section placed back on the main frame. Again, that main frame is a German industrial loom that I'm guessing came out of a mill somewhere nearby. He's grinding down some of the welds, and there they are welding again a few elements back on. Okay, so now here are some of the things that are ready to be repainted. So we clean everything off, as I said, and then the painting process begins. This is Joe. He's done almost all of the painting in our park. He's also a really skilled woodworker. Many people don't know, but a lot of the elements or parts of whirligigs are also made of wood. So he has done a lot of woodworking on the sculptures in the park. The first thing he does is apply a rust-proof coating. This is often black colored. He'll paint 2 of those on, so you'll see if something's all black, it's generally that underproof, that undercoating. And here again, you see it, he's painting that on that main frame and some of those sections. And here are the fan blades, the same ones that we took off of that top element. So they have a fresh coat of paint. Joe works really hard to match up Wallace's original paint with the types of paint we use. We use a DuPont Enron paint, which is really made for things like trains and boats, things that get a lot of wear and tear. So we expect this paint to last a long time. After we do 2 coats of undercoating paint, we do 2 coats of the color paint, and then we put on a clear coat. Now this is Maggie. She's also helped us a great deal, particularly with our painting projects and with our reflectors. Many whirligigs have bicycle rims on them. These are 3 of them that came off of the one from the Cameron Museum. They were in bad repair. The bearings no longer worked. They no longer turned well. And so often we replace these with new rims that are better quality and new and last a long time. Here, Mel and Sam replacing a lot of the different parts on those rims, the new rims. This is one of the most amazing parts of the project for me, is really the meticulous aspects of replacing all of the little details, the little cut road signs. So if you can imagine if you have a triangle shape that has part of an S from a stop sign. So they work really hard to replace that exactly. We've worked with North Carolina DOT to get all of that material so that really one of the things that fades over time is that reflective nature. You can imagine an old sign when you're driving down the highway versus a new one, how different that is to see all of those, all of the reflectors coming back at you. So as the video said, we've replaced, we think, around 22,000 pieces just in the park alone. The work from the Cameron had many hundreds of different elements in it. This is BB. He is another one of our conservation workers alongside Joe. He is a very skilled machinist, so he's helped us machine a lot of different parts and bearings on the whirligigs. And here you see him cutting, again, parts of cut road signs. So as I said, Joe is very skilled at painting. This paint is not very easy to work with, particularly in a sprayer. So as I said, Valas would often spray paint these, so they have the look of spray paint, these nice variations and sprays. And Joe has become really very good at using a spray gun with that. It's a very thick paint to mimic the style that Valas used. Here you can see him up close. So here are Sam and Mel putting the whirligig back together. So just as they took it apart, they put it all back together again. And this whole process, I think, took about 3 or 4 months to do. Here's Maggie again assembling it. You can see a plane there. Valas often used planes in his work. And then here's the team there with the finished whirligig in our conservation headquarters before it gets sent back to Wilmington. I don't have a great shot of it, but this is the finished whirligig there reinstalled at the Cameron Museum in Wilmington. You can see all of the fresh paint and well-working elements there. So I thought it might be nice to show you a video next. We have been working really since the project began in 2010 with a company called Warner and Company. They're out of Chapel Hill, and they, the North Carolina Arts Council was wise enough to know that we needed to really document this project from the beginning. And they started then in 2010 before any of the whirligigs were taken down from Valas's land. And began to document Valas, the original location, and do many interviews with friends and families of Valas. Ultimately, and I think this will be completed this year, there'll be a 30-minute documentary about the whole project start to finish. It talks about Valas, it talks about the park project, and it also talks about the economic impact that it's had on Wilson. In the meantime, they've created for us 5 shorter videos that that kind of detail an aspect of the project. So one may be on park design, one may be on people talking about Valas. This one is Valas himself. So this is video footage of Valas talking about himself and the project. I'm going to try again to share it. I know I had a few issues before, but I'm going to give it a shot here and see if we can get this to work.
Well, I had a lot of material left over, and I didn't want to junk it or salvage it. And I put most of it out there to pasture. I worked 10 years putting that out there to pasture every weekend for 10 years. Give or take a little bit on Sunday. Stayed with it, no help, period. The only help I had out there was well digging, dug a hole for the horses. It's 16 foot deep. I dug the rest of it with a damn hole digger. Everybody made fun of me and laughed at me and didn't pay them no damn mind. My daddy made us all work. Well, I built one overseas, and I didn't. That didn't entice me to build it while I come back here. And after I got through, retired, and the other boys left. They retired. I thought I'd make some. To start with, I had to learn how, and now I've done so much of it, it comes natural. I don't even use a ruler much. I can go down on a hacksaw, and I can come within a damn eighth inch and I was guessing at it. If I cut a 25 or 30 or 100. I'm not the type to sit down and do nothing. Worked all my life, and work won't hurt nobody. It hurts your feelings. You got to take the bad with the good. There's a whole lot of stuff I used to do here that it won't entertaining and it won't a pleasure to work on, but you had to take the bad with the good. If you just worked on the good, that would be like eating ice cream.
So I hope that gave you a little sense of Wallace and who he was at that time. I believe he was 91 years old. He worked up until really he was about 93 and a half when he stopped working and passed away at 94. The amazing thing is he didn't really start making these whirligigs until he was well into his 60s after retirement age. So he made a lot of things in that last 30 years or so of his life. You could see in the video his workshop with many of the smaller ones. People often ask me how many he made, and that's an unanswerable question. He made many thousands of them, particularly the smaller ones. People would come by very often and purchase them, or I think if he liked you, sometimes he would give it to you. But if he didn't, he might not even sell you one. So he was a very interesting guy. Very funny guy, but very serious about his work. He didn't think of them as artwork. He just loved what he was doing and loved that it brought himself and friends and family a lot of enjoyment. And I think he was surprised by the attention he later got. So as I said, I'll tell you a little bit about our new museum. You can see through the window there, the park in the background. This is just across the street from the park, in a building called Whirligig Station. And that building was originally a tobacco auction warehouse building called the High Dollar Warehouse. If you're familiar with downtown Wilson and its history, it was considered the world's greatest tobacco market. At one time, 16 of these large tobacco auction warehouse buildings populated the downtown area. And this is where many farmers would bring their tobacco to be auctioned off to the major tobacco companies. Of course, over time, that process has changed quite a bit. Many of those companies, I think, go directly to the farmers, and the auction houses still exist, but not to the degree. And many of these buildings, really beautiful, I think, fell into disrepair. They're really massive brick exterior buildings with these large plank floors and skylights. In here, you can see a few of those lights are on, but they're really not needed during the daytime because of the skylights. It really has an incredible amount of light that comes into these. They didn't want a lot of electricity in these buildings with lots of dry tobacco in them, just for safety reasons. As that marketplace changed, particularly in the early 80s, these buildings all fell into disrepair. Many of them were knocked down or burned down, and now there are really only a couple of them left. So this has been a really neat development in the downtown area across from the park. This is our museum space. The rest of the building on back is all apartment buildings. So there's 94 of those which are all rented out. Some of them are really beautiful with these large vaulted roofs and incredible windows. The park has really been an incredible generator for economic development in the downtown and for Wilson. We did an economic impact study last year and found that the property tax over the last 10 years really across Wilson County was flat, except for the area right around the park. And that increased about 36%. So really an incredible increase in property values around the park, and also the number of projects that are being done. When the park project started in 2010, the public and private investment in downtown was about $900,000 a year. And that almost immediately started to go up. And now we're averaging in the tens of millions of dollars. I think this will be the third year in a row of over $20 million in investment in the downtown. It's really generated an atmosphere around the arts. So there are a number of art galleries and arts-based businesses downtown, which is really exciting to see. And then more and more businesses, traditional shops and restaurants coming online. So this is our museum space. It opened in April. You can see we've got kind of a cool entry desk that's based on Wallace's work. I don't think I have a great shot of it, but under the glass there, you'll see if you visit the space, some of the old reflectors that we've taken off the whirligigs. This is the original back end of Mule Train, which we detailed in the video, that had the 15 moving parts. Because so much of this is wood and old gearboxes and chains, we had to recreate this entire back end for the one in the park. The rest of that is all original, but the back end we recreated. As I said, our conservation team is just incredible at being able to find exactly the part Wallace used when they're replacing something. We have a number of bicycle rims and bicycles in the park, and one of them had to be replaced, and they figured out, I can't remember exactly, but it's a particular model of Schwinn and the year that it was made. And so they sourced that. They found one that was exactly like it to replace it. So we've been particularly careful to match exactly Wallace's intentions in his work. So when you come to the museum, you can see the original one on display. If I'm there and nearby, I'm happy to turn the gear, and so you can still see all of the 15 elements still move like the one in the park. But we talk about with our signage, our conservation efforts to let people know all that it takes to keep everything going. This is some more information about our conservation. You can see there on the wall, there's that figure made out of cardboard. That's a stencil that was created to recreate a figure on one of the whirligigs that had badly rusted. In the glass case there on the wooden element, you can see a grease gun. Wallace was a big proponent of making sure you continue to keep these working well. I'm from, as I said, from Goldsboro, so I say it like Wallace said, we have to grease these things pretty often. It's an ongoing thing. One of the things that I think is really cool is you can see to the right-hand side there, these cylinder shapes, kind of rust colored. That's a material called UHMW. It's a sort of rubber plastic material that's impregnated with a lubricant. And in many of the whirligigs, instead of replacing them with traditional bearings and bushings, we use this material and to do that, to make it. You can drill it out, machine it, put a rod through it, and it will spin for a long time without needing to be replaced. So another one of the things we've done to really protect and make sure these are long lasting. You can see many of the cut elements of the reflective material, the cut road signs. This is a really neat one. It's called Big Star, and when the project started, Wallace just had this leaning up against one of the whirligigs out in his land. We have totally recreated it and hung it in our space. It took a little bit of work because we took it partially apart and back together to have that beam running through it, so it really kind of fits in with the architecture. But when you come to the space, you can see up close all of the reflectors that we've recreated. When it was in our conservation headquarters, and you can still do this now, it's a great photo opportunity, because if you turn your flash on your camera and take a picture, you see all that reflective light coming back at you that gives you a sense of what it was like 20 years ago when you would come around that curve at Wallace's land and see it at night. I love this mural here, and I think it's timely because of the Olympics going on. In 1996, Wallace was commissioned to do 4 whirligigs for the Atlanta Olympics. And in this photo, he's got his trailer loaded up and he's about to head down there. Those works have been conserved over time and are in a new folk art park down in Atlanta. If you go down there, I talked to his son recently and heard a story I hadn't heard, that they got this brand new truck, but they got on the road and there was a problem with it. So they had to drive kind of on the shoulder all the way down to Atlanta at about 35 miles an hour to get these down there. But they got down there and they got them installed, and everything was working great. The background back there, you can see part of one of the trucks he redid. I think these are really artworks in and of themselves, and I would love to get one down at the park for an event or for people to see. He would take old military surplus vehicles and turn them into cranes and wreckers. And he must have done over the years 7 or 8, maybe 10 of these. And he used these originally to move houses and barns and farm equipment, but then later to help build the whirligigs. And they're just incredible works of art themselves. Also in this mural, it's difficult to see, but all of those little circles and squares are a different media coverage that we've had. We've been really, Wallace became so well known that we've gotten a lot of media coverage locally, regionally, and nationally from the New York Times, Boston Globe, Washington Post, USA Today, and many news, online and television news outlets have covered Wallace and his story and the story of the park. So when you come in, it's a great way to find out more about the history of the media coverage. You also see the TV there. So that's our kiosk, and you can watch many of those short videos like I just showed you about Wallace. We have lots of his smaller ones on display. In our collection, we have 53. I think we have about 45 of them on display in the museum space, and you can see them up close. And I think they're really interesting to see kind of in comparison to the large ones in the park. Often with the small ones, he would do interesting and different things and use some colors that he would not normally use on the larger ones. So it's a great way to get a sense of all the different ways he created these incredible works of art. As we showed in the video, it's great to visit the park at night. It's a really totally different experience. I often tell people if they only have one chance to come, to maybe plan to come towards the end of the day so that you can see them in the daytime, and also wait until after dark to see a very different perspective. Often there are beautiful sunsets behind the whirligig, so that's a neat experience too. Again, here are our hours for the park, so 5 to 12 every day, and then our museum is 10 to 5 Tuesday through Saturday. And we would love to have you come and visit to see both the park and museum, but also a lot of the other things that are happening here, our shops and galleries and arts and crafts spaces. We have a brand new arts council, which is just 2 blocks from the park. It's a beautiful space, and they're doing great exhibitions over there. And so it's a great day trip to visit, easy from Raleigh if you're in that area. On September 11th, we're going to do one of our quarterly art walk. So if you're thinking about a specific day, that might be a good one to think about coming. You'll see lots of artist demos and demonstrations, and be able to talk to a lot of artists and gallerists in person. So that might be a good day. We've got a brand new a landing page that's specific to our museum, and you can also watch additional videos on the landing page, and that's this address, whirligigmuseum.com. So I think that's it for my presentation. I'm probably better with questions than I am at presenting, so I welcome any questions that y'all might have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bell. We have quite a few questions in the chat, so we'll try to get to as many as we have time for. The first one comes from Nancy Canterbury, who asked, in case of hurricanes or high winds, is there any special work needed to protect the whirligigs?
We get that question quite often, and the answer really is no. All of that work is done in our maintenance, so we do the very best we can to take care of these. People imagine that he got more wind at the original location because it was out in the country, but really we get quite a bit more wind where it is now. It's less protected by trees, so we do a lot of the maintenance work to really make them long lasting. There are a few of them that have pins in them that can stop them from spinning, and that was really done just for transit purposes. But when we talk to engineers, they tell us that just to let them move. So you can imagine if you lock one into one location, but the wind is blowing from a 90-degree angle, that's really detrimental to the work. And so we just let them continue to move even in high winds.
Thank you. The next question is from Annette Smith, who asked, is Wallace Simpson's home place preserved, and is his work still there?
His house is still there. There is no longer work out there. His wife and family live out there, but the work is no longer there. It's in the park. And if you saw in the video, there was a pond, a farm pond that they were laid out around. The layout in the park is very similar, except for the pond. We have a stage and green for events. So we've tried to keep the feel and layout similar to the way it was there.
Thank you. The next two questions come from Vicki Simmons. First, Wallace mentioned being overseas. Do you know if he fought in World War II?
He did. He was in the Army Air Corps in World War II, and he was stationed in Saipan, and that's where he made that first whirligig. He rigged up an old wash tub to a windmill so that the guys could wash their clothes. So that was what we think was his first wind-powered machine. He later made a similar contraption that would help move heat through his house. He created this sort of furnace thing outside with a windmill that would help move heat through his house. His wife was scared that it was so close to the house. He later moved it out into a field, and I think that's when he really started to make things that were more aesthetic objects versus having a function.
And the next question, I plan to visit the Whirligig Park in a few weeks. Should I visit the museum first or the park first?
I think probably the park. I mean, the park is our primary thing. I mean, it's what our primary purpose is to preserve and maintain those. And so it's great to get a real sense of the size and scope of them, and then come inside and learn more about the conservation efforts that we've made, and see this, as I said, see the smaller ones and think about the differences between the small ones and the large ones. I should also mention that we have a great gift shop. So if you want a t-shirt or something like that, you can get that in our museum as well.
Thank you. The next question comes from Kathy Kahn, who asked, how are the conservation efforts funded?
We are all, we're a nonprofit. So many people think that the park project is a product of the city, but it's not really. It's totally our small nonprofit. So we wrote a lot of grants. We do a lot of fundraising. We have a membership campaign every year to raise the money for those. So really, it's traditional museum fundraising to take care of these.
Thank you. And from Adrienne Hartle, with all the reconstruction and replacements of so many elements, do you consider the works to be the original Wallace works or copies?
No, I consider them original. Even though Wallace died before the park was completed, he worked very closely. He would spend time down in our conservation lab and really work with them on how things should be done and ideas around something. So if the team had a question about something, they would work with Wallace to understand what material to use or type of device or even colors. So very often when you're taking these things apart, you might see 3 colors. Wallace would continually work on them and they would ask Wallace, what color should this be? And so I consider them original works of art, but we are fortunate to have, in the case of the mule train, that original back end so that people can see them up close.
Thank you. And from Judy, did Wallace coin the word whirligig?
No, he didn't. He called them windmills. And I think it was really the tourism office here who were one of the first people to kind of understand the magnitude of what was happening. They started calling them whirligigs. You can think, when we think of whirligigs, we think of maybe those small things in people's gardens, like a little figure chopping wood when the wind blows, or like the ducks with their wings spinning. People in one form or another, there have been little objects called whirligigs for a long time, but really he referred to them as windmills.
Thank you. And from Marie, do you have classes on how to make your own whirligig?
We don't necessarily. We do have, and it's because of the pandemic. We're a couple years out from it, but we do have an education curriculum that we mentioned in the video called Kinetic Connections, that we've created, a 3rd through 5th grade education STEM curriculum, or STEAM if you like to add the A, based on North Carolina standards, that teachers would come in, learn aspects of the whirligigs and go to their classes. We taught 99 teachers from 15 counties that curriculum, and they went back and taught their students. Often part of that process is building whirligigs on the different levels. We've also created a new K through 6th grade field trip activity. So if you haven't had a chance to go through the full curriculum, you can come to the park when we get back to doing field trips and get a grade specific project to do that meets a North Carolina standard.
Thank you. The next question, are there any plans to add any new things to the park?
Not to the location itself necessarily. We have done a few things like that. We've got a pavilion there, so we've done some sort of enhancements, like adding misters to the pavilion so that it's cooler during the summer. We're going to add some more shade elements. We've added a sound system throughout the park so that we can program it, and I think it's a really neat element that you can kind of have the music out there. And then I think our next real big phase is strategic planning for the area beyond the park, so that how do you expand it? Maybe not necessarily with additional whirligigs, although we have a few more in our collection, but other sort of features that would enhance the current park, but also bring more opportunity for visitation. I'm not sure what that would be.
And Annette Smith asked, did he have patents? Are there copycats?
So the works in the park are all copyrighted. So when an artist makes a work, they're sort of inherently copyrighted, and we've gone through the process to sort of officially copyright them. But that all of those, it's a little complicated. Often when an artist sells a work, he or she retains the copyright. In this case, all of those copyrights transfer to our organization. So a person would not be allowed to make a product that represents our particular whirligigs or recreate for sale exactly. There are people that make things somewhat similarly, but nothing quite like this.
Thank you. And we have time for just one more question. This one comes from Vicki Simmons, who asked, before he died, did Wallace have a deep understanding of what a great contribution he made to the folk art world?
That's a really good question. As I said, he never thought of himself as an artist. He did not do any of this thing for acclaim. But I think he began to understand the recognition he was getting. As I said, he in the video, you could see him standing at a podium that he got the North Carolina Award, which is one of the highest awards that an artist can receive. And so he got some acclaim. He's got a large whirligig at the American Visionary Art Museum at the Inner Harbor in Baltimore. And the director there was great at promoting his work and making people begin to understand the magnitude of Wallace and what he did. I'll actually be going up there in about a week and a half. They have a very large one, and we're talking to them about possibly serving their whirligig as well. But I think he began to understand it. Whether he cared that much about it, I don't know. He was a very just very much laid back, and I don't think any of that sort of thing concerned him. But I'm very excited that he's received the recognition, and I think hopefully will continue to people will continue to understand the importance of what he's done.
Yeah, thank you very much to everyone who asked questions, and thank you, Mr. Bell, for the excellent presentation.
Sure, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jeff. I know you certainly inspired me to head out to Wilson and check out the park and the museum in person. And thank you to all those of you who joined us today. We hope to see you at our next History at High Noon Women Empowering Women as we honor Women's Equality Day happening later in the month of August. We'll be featuring Danielle Carmen, Executive Director of the North Carolina Council for Women and Youth Involvement. Thanks, everybody. See you soon. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.